I knew the laughter was meant to be harmless, but when it spread across the crystal hall like a cracking glass, it felt aimed straight at my ribs. I stood there in my navy dress, simple, understated, chosen to avoid attention, while the chandeliers above me scattered gold light over people who had never once doubted their place in the world. My father raised his glass, his voice booming across the luxury Christmas party as though he were still the undisputed king of Lake Tahoe. "You poor nobody," he roared, and the crowd erupted. I felt the heat crawl up my neck. Someone whispered, "Is she still unemployed?" Another chuckled, "She's the haze who couldn't cut it." My mother winced but stayed silent. My brother smirked behind his champagne flute. It didn't matter that I'd spent the past 4 years clawing my way out of the ruins they left me in. To them, I was still the girl who failed, still the daughter who didn't belong. But the truth was already on its way, moving faster than any rumor, any insult, any legacy they held over my head. Because somewhere at that exact moment, a national news anchor was preparing to say my name on live television. And when that TV switched in the middle of this glittering room, when the camera cut to me standing beside Elon Musk signing a $1 billion deal, every person here, my father included, would choke on their own certainty. I didn't know it then, but I could feel the air shifting like the moment, right before a storm tears open the night sky. I tightened my grip on the glass of water I'd been pretending to sip. My father continued telling some story about the importance of real business sense, his voice echoing across the hall lined with crystal garlands and winter roses. I had grown up in this estate. I'd spent Christmas after Christmas trying to earn their approval. Tonight I was here for a different reason. I was here to say goodbye to a version of myself they had built and broken. My mother approached first, gliding across the marble like she was floating on a cloud of expensive perfume. "Darling," she whispered tightly, "you're standing too close to the press. Please move to the side. We don't need any more attention." She tugged me toward a darker corner, her hand cold and rigid. "Your father is very stressed. Let's not provoke anything tonight." I nodded, though the knot in my throat tightened. They always needed me to shrink so they could shine. A group of guests lingered near the grand staircase. A woman in a sequined silver gown looked at me, then leaned to her husband. "Is that the one who tried starting some small tech thing?" He laughed softly. "Yes, I heard it crashed before it even lifted off." She giggled. "Well, she came as entertainment tonight." I exhaled slowly, keeping my expression still. I'd learned the power of silence at events like these. If you let people talk long enough, they reveal more about themselves than anything they could possibly say about you. Then, of course, my brother arrived. Liam, handsome in a way that felt manufactured like a politician in training, clinked his glass against mine without waiting for me to look up. "Glad you made it," he said, eyes glinting. "I know fancy parties can be overwhelming when you're between jobs." His fiancée Sabrina touched his arm with a slow, sugary smile. "We're all rooting for you to find your path," she said sweetly. "It must be liberating not to worry about things like career stability." I swallowed the burn rising in my chest. If only they knew how far from unstable I actually was. My father's voice roared above the chatter again. "Attention, everyone." The orchestra softened. The room dimmed slightly as guests turned toward him. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate success, legacy, and the Hayes name." Even if he paused for effect, some members of this family didn't quite inherit the talent. Laughter exploded. I forced a breath. My pulse drummed in my ears. He lifted his wine. "But even failures deserve a Merry Christmas." The humiliation swept through me like cold water. For a second, I fought the urge to step outside, to breathe, to remind myself why I came. But I stayed rooted. My father always counted on my silence. He expected it. He wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. A low murmur rose from the crowd. People turned toward the massive wall-mounted TV above the fireplace where the news broadcast suddenly flickered. The music quieted. My brother glanced up. "Another story about the stock market," he muttered. But then the anchor appeared on screen, expression urgent. "We interrupt this program with breaking news," she announced. Moments ago, SpaceX confirmed a historic $1 billion partnership with emerging AI startup Astramind Technologies. My breath caught. Guests leaned in. The TV cut to footage bright, crisp, unmistakable. Me, standing beside Elon Musk, in a charcoal blazer, signing documents on a sleek metal table. A banner ran boldly across the bottom, CEO $1B partnership confirmed. Gasps. Silence. A glass shattered my father's. His hand had gone limp, wine spilling across the marble like a dark red wound. Sabrina's mouth hung open. Liam blinked, stunned. My mother's hand flew to her chest as though she'd forgotten to breathe. The anchor's voice continued echoing through the hall. Astromind's founder, Isabella Hayes, becomes one of the youngest high-impact innovators to secure a $1 billion deal with SpaceX. My father whispered, barely audible. What is this?" The crowd erupted, not in laughter this time, but in a whirlwind of shocked murmurs. "Is that really her? She's the CEO. My God, Astramind is hers. Elon Musk signed with her. Wasn't she the failure?" I stepped forward, the light catching on my dress. I looked at my father, whose face now matched the color of the spilled wine at his feet. He opened his mouth again, but no words came. For the first time in my life, he was speechless. I held his gaze steady, unblinking. "You called me poor, Dad," I said softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "Tonight the world calls me something else." I turned away before his breath could return, letting the murmurs swell around me, letting the truth do what it always does, rise. Somewhere in the hall, the orchestra resumed playing. Soft, distant, almost reverent. They had tried to erase me. Tonight the world rewrote me, and this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep the night after the gala. Even in the quiet of my hotel room overlooking Lake Tahoe, the echo of my father's voice, "You poor nobody," kept ricocheting through my skull. Not because it hurt anymore, but because of how wrong he had been, how confidently he had humiliated the one person he believed could never rise above his shadow. By morning I had replayed the events 100 times, the way the room laughed, the way the TV flickered to the breaking news, the way his wine glass slipped from his hand as my face appeared next to Elon Musk. But the moment that lingered most was the silence that came right after the collective stunned stillness of people who finally realized they'd never understood me at all. I stepped out into the crisp winter air, the weight of snow clouds hanging overhead. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls from unknown numbers, texts from journalists, missed calls from my mother, my brother, even people from my past who suddenly remembered I existed. But among the chaos, one message stood out. "Alex, we need to meet now. There's something you should see." I took one last breath of cold air and headed toward the parking lot. When I arrived at the small cafe downtown where we had agreed to meet, Alex was already inside, pacing, his coat still on, hair sticking up like he'd run both hands through it too many times. Maya sat at the corner table with her laptop open, eyes wide and anxious. The moment I stepped in, they both looked at me like I had returned from war. "You saw the news?" Alex asked breathlessly. "Kind of hard to miss," I replied. Maya turned her laptop toward me. "This isn't about last night. It's about what happened right after." On the screen was a financial news site. The headline made my stomach twist. Orion Systems releases statement claiming Astramind used stolen Hayes financial models. I exhaled slowly. Of course they did. Alex leaned forward. "This is coordinated, Isabella. It dropped 20 minutes after the gala broadcast. They weren't just trying to discredit you. They wanted to destroy the deal." Maya clicked another tab. "There's more. They filed an emergency injunction request to freeze Astramind's IP until an investigation is done." I stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Orion wasn't trying to win. They were trying to erase me. I closed the laptop gently. "We have to leave." "Now," Alex blinked. "Leave where?" Seattle, I said, grabbing my coat. If Orion wants to attack me through Hayes Financial, I need to know what really happened inside that company. Maya hesitated. Isabella going back there, I know, I interrupted. But there's no deal with SpaceX without clearing this. And I'm not losing everything because Orion is desperate. Outside, the wind cut across the lake like a blade. We got into the rental car, silent at first, the hum of the heater filling the space between us. As Alex drove, Maya spoke softly. Are you ready for this, facing your family again? After last night, I stared out the window at the snow-dusted pines. I don't know if ready is the word, but running isn't an option anymore. Halfway to the airport, my phone rang. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another journalist, but the name that appeared made my pulse spike. Mom, I answered reluctantly. Emily. Her voice was thin, trembling. Mom, your father… She let out a shaky breath. He collapsed early this morning. He's conscious now, but he's asking for you. A hollow ache tightened in my chest. For all his cruelty, for all his arrogance, he was still my father. Is it serious? I asked. There's stress on his heart, she whispered. The doctors say he needs rest, but the board is demanding answers about the broadcast. Of course they were. Are you coming home? She asked. I hesitated, staring at the white lines of the highway stretching ahead. Yes, I said finally. I'm coming. When we arrived at the airport, our flight was delayed by 2 hours due to a snowstorm, leaving us stuck in a terminal crowded with families heading home for the holidays. Every TV in the boarding area seemed to be tuned to the same thing, news anchors dissecting the gala moment. Some reports focused on the billion-dollar deal. Others replayed my father's insult. People watched the clips with amusement, shock, curiosity. A few even glanced at me, whispering. I pulled my scarf higher around my neck. Alex leaned closer. You okay, this attention? My voice caught. It doesn't feel like success. It feels like exposure. Maya squeezed my hand. That's only because you're not used to it yet. But last night didn't define you. You defined you. I managed a faint smile. When we finally boarded, I sat by the window and watched as the plane ascended through layers of dark cloud. Below us, Lake Tahoe disappeared, swallowed by white. All I could think about was the life I'd left behind in Seattle. The office I'd once loved, the family who had thrown me out the day my name was erased from the corporate directory, as though I'd never belonged there. The past wasn't finished with me. It had waited patiently, and now it wanted answers. By the time we landed in Seattle, night had fallen again. The sky was low and restless, as if echoing my own unease. The city lights flickered through the fog, familiar yet distant. The Hayes estate rose at the top of Queen Anne Hill, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. As we pulled into the long driveway, I saw silhouettes through the front windows. My mother pacing, my father sitting, slumped in a chair, Liam standing stiffly in the background. They looked smaller than I remembered, less powerful, more human. My mother opened the door before I could ring the bell. Her mascara was smudged hair, slightly undone, unusual for her. She clutched my arm, searching my face. Oh, thank God. I wasn't sure you'd come. I'm here, I replied, though my voice felt foreign in my throat. She led me to the study where my father sat. When he looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen since childhood. Not anger, not arrogance, but fear. Real human fear. You came, he rasped. I nodded. His eyes glistened, though he fought it. Your mother said I should apologize. But I don't know how. I said nothing. I didn't have to. He took a shaky breath. I heard what happened last night. The deal. Elon Musk. His voice trembled. I didn't know you had it in you. The old hurt flickered inside me, sharp and bitter. Because you never looked, I said quietly. He lowered his gaze. A moment of silence hung between us. Then he whispered, They're saying we might lose the company. Hayes Financial could collapse. There it was. The truth behind the apology. He needed me, not as a daughter, but as someone who still had power. Dad, I said softly, I didn't come to fix Hayes Financial. His jaw tightened. Then why are you here? Because despite everything, he was my father. Because the child in me still remembered wanting his approval. Because the woman I had become was finally strong enough to face him without breaking. Before I could answer, the door creaked and Liam stepped in. He looked at me for a long moment, something simmering behind his eyes, envy, or regret, or both. You shouldn't have come back, he muttered. I lifted my chin. I didn't come back for you, he scoffed. Good, because we don't need you. My father grimaced. Liam, stop. But he didn't. You think signing a flashy deal changes who you are? You're still the sister who couldn't even finish her first project here? You're still the one Dad fired. Something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with clarity. I stepped closer, meeting his glare. I didn't come here to fight. I came to understand what happened. Because someone inside this family or this company gave Orion what they needed to attack me. His expression faltered. My mother's face paled. My father inhaled sharply. And just like that, I knew someone here had betrayed more than just the company. They had betrayed me. I straightened my shoulders. We all have truths to face, I said quietly, and I'm ready to face mine. The question is whether any of you are ready to face yours. As I turned toward the window overlooking the estate, snow began to fall, soft, steady, relentless, coating everything in white. A clean slate. Or a burial. Only time would tell. The house was too quiet for a place built to celebrate power. That was the first thing I noticed when I woke up in the guest room I hadn't slept in for 4 years. No clatter from the kitchen, no footsteps on the marble floors, no distant hum of my father barking orders down the hall, just silence, thick, uneasy, stretched tight like a wire ready to snap. I sat up slowly, watching the pale Seattle winter light seep through the curtains. For a moment, I let myself remember being 23, waking up in this same room with hope instead of dread. Back then, I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, if I loved enough, I could earn a place in this family's story. Now I understood I had to write my own. I dressed quietly and headed downstairs. Halfway down the staircase, I heard hushed voices coming from the study. At first, I thought it was my parents arguing, but when I reached the bottom step, I saw Liam standing by the fireplace, face tight, jaw-clenched, eyes narrowed at something in his hand. He didn't realize I was there until I spoke. Rough morning, he flinched slightly, shoving the papers behind his back before turning to me. You shouldn't sneak up on people. I wasn't sneaking, I said. Your guilt is showing, his eyes flashed. You think you know everything now because you signed one deal. I stepped closer. I don't know everything. But I know Orion released documents claiming I stole models from Hayes Financial models that didn't even exist when I left. I paused, which means someone gave them something to fabricate. Liam's lips pulled into a forced smirk. Don't look at me. Orion approached Dad long before they ever heard your name. That's exactly what worries me, I said. Orion already had their claws in this family. Before he could respond, the door behind him opened and Sabrina emerged. Her expression froze when she saw me. Oh, she said, blinking rapidly. You're up. And you're still here, I replied. Her smile flickered. Your timing could be better, you know. The family has enough going on without your little spectacle. I stared at her. My little spectacle. You mean the truth going public? Liam stepped protectively closer to her. We don't need you stirring things up. Funny, I said, because everything is already stirred. I'm just trying to see who's holding the spoon. Sabrina rolled her eyes. Please, you think you're some investigator now. This family was doing just fine until you showed up. Was it? I asked quietly. Then why are federal agents asking questions? Her face iced over. Liam placed a hand on her arm, but she shook it off. Don't act like you're the hero here, Isabella. You ran away when things got hard. You abandoned your family. My family abandoned me first, I said. You got fired, she snapped. Own it. Oh, I own it, I said. What I don't own is whatever disaster you two have created in this house. But I will find out. Color drained from her cheeks, not fully, but enough to tell me the truth was closer than they wanted me to think. Before the tension could break, my mother appeared in the hallway, her composure restored, but her eyes still tired. She moved between us like a diplomat in a war zone. Enough, she whispered sharply. All of you, she turned to me. Your father wants to see you in the boardroom. My stomach tightened. Why? Because, she said, smoothing her hair, though it didn't need smoothing, the board is meeting today. And they want to address the situation. The situation, I repeated. You mean the part where Orion tried to destroy me, or the part where my own father publicly humiliated me moments before the world watched me sign a billion-dollar contract? Her jaw clenched. It was a misunderstanding. No, I said. It wasn't. She didn't argue. She simply turned and walked down the corridor, expecting me to follow. I did. The boardroom hadn't changed. The long mahogany table, the leather chairs, the skyline visible through the floor to ceiling windows, it still looked like the ground zero of every power struggle in my childhood. The place where decisions were made behind closed doors, where my father's voice used to dominate the air like a storm. Today, the air was fractured. 9 board members sat in tense silence as my father stared at a stack of documents. His face was drawn paler than the night before. Whatever pride he'd wielded like a weapon at the gala was gone. He didn't look up until I took a seat across from him. Isabella, he said, voice low and gravelly. The board has questions. I nodded. I figured. A man from the far end of the table cleared his throat. We understand you're involved with Astromine Technologies. Involved, I repeated. I'm the founder. And the CEO. A ripple of murmurs traveled around the table. And the deal with SpaceX, another asked. That was legitimate, yes, I said. Very. My father rubbed his temples as if the admission pained him physically. One of the older board members leaned forward. Then perhaps you can explain why Orion Systems filed a legal claim suggesting you used Hayes Financial Research to build Athena Core. Here it was, the real reason they called me in. Because someone fed them false information, I said. Do you have proof? The man asked. I met his stare. Not yet, but I will. The room shifted uneasy. My father finally spoke. Isabella, if your actions jeopardize the company? My actions, I cut in. Orion is attacking me because they know I'm a threat. And if we follow the money trail, we'll probably find exactly who opened the door for them. Someone across the table inhaled sharply. Another shuffled a stack of papers nervously. I scanned their faces and saw it, the fear. Not of me, of exposure. My father clenched the edge of the table. We can't afford a scandal. Then you should have thought of that before firing your only honest child, I said calmly. A silence fell heavy as snow. My mother stepped in. This isn't productive. No, I said softly. But it's necessary. The board stared at me, not with dismissiveness this time, not with patronizing smiles. With realization, recognition, the kind they'd never given me when I worked here. I stood slowly. Whether you believe it or not, I didn't come to destroy this company. But I won't let anyone destroy mine. So you all have 2 choices: cooperate with the investigation, or get swallowed by it. A beat of silence. Then a voice from the table, timid, almost defeated, asked Isabella, What do you plan to do next? I looked out at the Seattle skyline, the city where I'd been broken and rebuilt. Find the truth, I said, and I'm starting inside this family. I walked out before anyone could speak. In the hallway, my hands trembled, not from fear but from adrenaline, from the shift I felt deep in my bones. For the first time in my life, the Hayes estate wasn't towering over me like a monument to my failures. It was shaking, cracking, waiting to fall, and I was no longer the daughter begging for a place inside its walls. I was the one holding the match. I found my father alone in the study, the same room where he'd once told me I wasn't leadership material. The heavy drapes were drawn back, letting in a gray wash of morning light that made everything look harsher. The polished wood, the framed awards, the fireplace that had burned more resentment than warmth. He stood with his back to me, gripping the edge of his desk as though it were the only thing holding him upright. "You're early," he said without turning around. "I didn't sleep much," I replied. He finally faced me, and for a moment I saw the man he had been years ago, the titan, the force of nature, the Hayes everyone revered. But the lines on his face were deeper now, his eyes troubled, his confidence replaced by something else. "Fear. Sit," he said, gesturing to the leather chair across from him. I didn't move. "I'd rather stand." He studied me for a long second, then nodded, as if accepting that I was no longer someone he could position like an underling. He lowered himself into his chair, exhaling sharply. "There's a great deal you don't know." I met his gaze. "I'm listening." He opened a drawer and slid a thick folder toward me. I stayed where I was. He sighed. "Fine. I'll explain." He hesitated, swallowing hard. Hayes Financial has been under pressure for over a year. Declining assets, liquidity issues, failed partnerships. The board doesn't know the worst of it. The tension in my shoulders tightened. "What worst?" He looked down at his hands. "A loan." I blinked. "What kind of loan?" "A significant one," he said. "Taken from Orion Systems." My breath caught. "You borrowed from Orion." "We didn't have a choice," he replied. "Your brother—" He stopped, rubbing his forehead. Liam was in over his head. He signed a contract without consulting me, without understanding its implications. I stepped closer to his desk, anger simmering through my ribs. He signed a financial contract on behalf of the company. Is that even legal? "No," my father whispered. "It wasn't." Shock prickled through my chest. "So he forged your signature." My father didn't answer. He didn't have to. I felt the room tilt for a moment. Every humiliation from the gala, every careless insult, every dismissive laugh, they had all been hiding this. The real downfall of Hayes Financial wasn't incompetence. It was corruption. Family corruption. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You let the world believe I was the failure while Liam was destroying this company from the inside." His jaw tightened. I was trying to protect the family name. I stared at him. By sacrificing mine before he could respond, the study door opened. My mother slipped inside, her face, pale, her expression soft in a way that always felt practiced. "Jonathan," she said, "the investigators called again. They want the documents by noon." "I know," he muttered. She turned to me, eyes pleading. "Isabella, please, don't make this harder. The last thing we need is more attention." I laughed softly, bitterly. "You mean more attention like the national broadcast last night?" Her cheeks flushed. "You humiliated your father." "He humiliated himself," I said. And the truth wasn't mine to hide. My mother stepped closer. "We are trying to hold this family together. You could help us if you wanted. You could clear this up. You could tell the investigators Liam meant well, that it was all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "He forged a signature on a multi-million-dollar financial document." My father clenched his teeth as though hearing it aloud made it real. "That wasn't the only thing he did," he said quietly. My mother stiffened. "Jonathan," he held up a hand. "She needs to know." I folded my arms. Nobody looked up at me, eyes tired. "Orion has something on Liam, and he's been hiding it." A chill crept down my spine. "What do you mean, something?" My father hesitated. My mother closed her eyes, defeated. I stepped forward, voice sharp. "Tell me." "It's a debt," he said finally. "From gambling." I stared at him. "Gambling." He nodded, shame etching every part of his expression. "They threatened to expose him unless he signed the loan agreement." "So it did." Then he made it worse by allowing Orion access to internal financials. He thought it was harmless. He thought no one would notice. My stomach twisted. "They used him. They used all of us," my father said. "And now the entire company is at risk." A moment of silence thickened between us. Then a voice came from the doorway. "And whose fault is that exactly?" We turned. Liam stood there, face flushed, eyes bloodshot. He looked like he hadn't slept, or perhaps he'd been drinking since dawn. He stepped into the study, gaze locked on me. "This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it?" he said. "For all of them to see I'm the real failure." "I wanted the truth," I replied. He scoffed. "Truth? You wouldn't know truth if it slapped you. You walked away. You left us to deal with everything. Then you show up last night like some hero with Elon Musk at your side, and suddenly you're the perfect daughter." "I never said I was perfect," I said. "I said I was done being your scapegoat." He pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you're better than me now?" "No," I said softly. "I think I stopped letting you convince me I was worse." The room went silent. My mother pressed her hand to her chest. My father stared at the floor, and Liam looked like he'd been struck. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "I didn't mean to ruin the company." "I know," I whispered. "You meant to hide your mistakes. But hiding them didn't make them disappear. It made them grow." His eyes glossed over, but he blinked hard, refusing to break in front of me. "You won't tell them," he said. "You'll protect me." I tilted my head. "Why would I?" His jaw clenched. "Because family protects each other." My father exhaled deeply, as though something inside him finally snapped. "We haven't protected her in years, Liam." For once, Liam didn't argue. He just leaned against the desk, shoulders slumped. I looked at my parents, two people who had spent a lifetime building a legacy, only to watch it crack under the weight of their own pride. Then I looked at my brother, brilliant but broken, flawed in ways he refused to admit until everything collapsed. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said quietly, "but I won't lie for you either." My mother inhaled sharply. "Isabella, no," I said, holding up a hand. "I'm done living in the shadows of your mistakes. If I'm being investigated, I'll tell the truth. And whatever happens, happens." My father closed his eyes. Liam swallowed hard. My mother's lip trembled. The whole world outside was shifting, Orion plotting its next move, SpaceX waiting for a clear path, the investigation closing in. And inside this house, the truth had finally detonated. I stepped back toward the door. "We can deal with the fallout," I said, "but only if we stop lying." Then I opened the door and walked out, leaving the three of them in the ruins they had built. The silence behind me wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of a dynasty realizing it was no longer in control. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small walking away from that house. I felt free. I left the study with my pulse pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The hallway felt colder than before, as if the house itself was recoiling from the truth that had finally surfaced. I walked past the tall windows overlooking Queen Anne Hill, the sky outside a heavy slate gray threatening snow. This estate had once felt endless. Now it felt like a cage built from polished stone. The boardroom was down the hall, and when I pushed the tall double doors open, the air shifted as sharply as a blade. 9 board members sat around the long mahogany table, but hiding them didn't make them disappear. It made them grow. His eyes glossed over, but he blinked hard, refusing to break in front of me. "You won't tell them," he said. "You'll protect me." I tilted my head. "Why would I?" His jaw clenched. "Because family protects each other." My father exhaled deeply, as though something inside him finally snapped. "We haven't protected her in years, Liam." For once, Liam didn't argue. He just leaned against the desk, shoulders slumped. Another board member spoke, tapping a pen nervously against his notepad. "We have reason to believe Orion Systems had access to our financials months before the liquidity crisis. Yet we can't determine how." I sat back. "I can." 7 heads jerked in my direction. The silver-haired man frowned. "And what makes you think you know more than the internal investigators?" "Because I know my brother," I said evenly. "I know what he did. And now you do too." A murmur rippled through the room. Another member, a woman with sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Forged signatures. Illegal loans. Unauthorized access. We've only just learned the extent of the misconduct. And frankly, this compromises the company. No, someone else said. What compromises the company is the fact that Orion released a statement tying her to it. He pointed directly at me. We need to know if she's a liability. The woman beside him hissed. You mean the only person who's managed not to sink this family? My jaw tightened, but I didn't flinch. Go ahead, I said. Ask. The silver-haired man nodded. Did you use stolen Hayes financial data to build Athena Core? No, I said without hesitation. Athena was built after I left. Every line of code is mine. The woman with sharp eyes studied my face. And Orion's claim I lifted my chin. A lie they fabricated to protect themselves. And why, another man asked, would they target you? A cold laugh escaped me. Because I beat them. The room fell silent. They exchanged glances, some skeptical, some intrigued. Finally, the silver-haired man clicked off the projector and folded his hands. Miss Hayes, he said, there is still the matter of your affiliation with SpaceX. I raised an eyebrow. Affiliation. He shifted uncomfortably. Fine, the partnership. The $1 billion partnership, I corrected him. A murmur swept the room. Do you realize, he continued, what that kind of press means for Hayes Financial? It raises questions. People will assume we knew. People will ask why the family's daughter returned in the middle of a scandal. I stared at him. You think I came back for you? No one spoke. I came back because Orion attacked me, I said. They used your downfall to try to bring down my company. And if you want stability, the smartest thing you can do is stop letting corrupt deals define you. The woman with sharp eyes leaned back, hiding a smirk. She has a point. But another man, red-faced and hostile, slammed his hand on the table. She's being investigated too. She could take us all down with her. I'm not the one who made a deal with Orion, I said softly. Your CEO did. And your golden boy. I paused, and possibly others in this room. The red-faced man went pale. Before he could speak, the door burst open. Sabrina rushed in heels, clicking like rapid gunfire, her hair perfect and her expression venomous. You need to hear this, she said breathlessly. My stomach tightened. Sabrina, this is a private. She ignored me, stepping directly to the head of the table. Orion is calling another press conference. They're about to release documents tying Isabella to the original Hayes financial model. The room erupted. That data is fabricated, I said. Sabrina shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. What matters is the public won't know the difference. The red-faced board member pointed at me. SEE. She's a liability. But Sabrina wasn't finished. She turned toward me with a saccharine smile. They also have screenshots of code similarities. Something about risk signatures, whatever that means. I inhaled sharply. Athena Core did use a similar structure to a report I once drafted at Hayes Financial years ago before the board shredded it. But that model had been mine, and someone inside this house had given it to Orion. Who gave them that, I demanded. Sabrina blinked innocently. Maybe you should ask your family. My jaw clenched. Sabrina, enough. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Oh, but I'm just getting started. Liam appeared behind her, face flushed. Sabrina, what are you doing? What you're too weak to do, she hissed. Protect us. Us, not the family. Just her. The woman with sharp eyes slammed her notebook shut. This is chaos. We need to remove Jonathan as CEO immediately. He's already suspended, the silver-haired man said. We need an interim CEO. My stomach dropped. I saw the direction their eyes were shifting. I held up a hand. No, but it was too late. The woman said, you're the only Hayes with credibility right now. I froze. I'm running Astramind. And Hayes Financial will collapse without a leader who isn't under investigation, she replied. You're clean, and you're the only one the public isn't calling a criminal. Sabrina laughed sharply. Oh, this is rich. The fired daughter becomes the new CEO. No, Liam said, stepping forward. She can't. She doesn't understand. Sit down, Liam, the woman snapped. You have zero authority here. He looked at me, wounded pride burning in his eyes. Don't you dare take this from me. I don't want it, I said. Liar, he spat. But the truth was simple, I truly didn't want it. Hayes Financial had been my childhood dream. Now it was nothing but a graveyard. I exhaled slowly. I'm not here to save this company. I'm here to save my own. The silver-haired man nodded reluctantly. Then we will appoint an independent CEO. Sabrina scoffed. Good luck finding one in 48 hours. The room dissolved into heated debate voices, rising papers, slamming chairs, scraping. No one noticed that I stepped back from the table, watching them tear each other apart, watching the legacy they worshipped crumble in real time. For the first time, I saw Hayes Financial clearly, not as the empire I once dreamed of inheriting, but as the slow-burning disaster it had always been. I left the boardroom without another word. The moment I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. Alex's name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Tell me it's good news. It's not bad news, he said cautiously. But you should see this. See what SpaceX wants. Another meeting, he said. A private one. They want a full audit of your tech. Something big is happening. I paused at the end of the hallway, staring at the framed photographs of past CEOs, my grandfather, my father, the men who believed they built an unshakable empire. Something big was happening, bigger than Hayes, bigger than Orion, bigger than the past that had kept me small. Book it, I said quietly. Then I turned away from the walls that once defined me and walked toward the world that was finally opening its doors. The snow had already begun falling when I walked out of Hayes Tower, each flake drifting slowly through the raw Seattle air like the world was trying to cool a fire that had been burning for years. My breath left my lips in small white clouds that vanished as quickly as they formed. Something inside me felt the same dissolving, reforming, shifting. My phone buzzed again. Alex meeting confirmed. SpaceX HQ. Monday. Private review in their high-security lab. A chill went through me. Not fear. Readiness. I tucked my phone into my coat pocket and headed toward the black SUV parked by the curb. My driver Marcus stepped out to open the door for me, but I stopped short when I saw a figure leaning against the car. Sabrina. Her arms were crossed, chin lifted, eyes sharp, with the kind of smugness people wear when they think they've won something. You really should tell your driver not to leave the engine running, she said lightly. Makes it too easy for someone to walk right up. I'm not in the mood, I muttered, pulling the door handle. She blocked it with her hand. You're making a mistake, she said. A big one. I met her gaze. Bigger than covering for my brother while he blew a hole in the company. Sabrina's smile twitched. You think you know everything? No, I said. Just enough. She clicked her tongue, leaning in as if sharing a secret. SpaceX isn't calling you in for a private review because they're impressed. They're looking for a reason to cut you loose. My expression didn't change, but inside, something tightened. She noticed. Oh, you didn't know? Her voice softened into a condescending purr. Orion has been feeding them information too. And if SpaceX finds even the smallest flaw, do you know what they'll do? Evaluate it objectively, I said. She laughed. They'll kill the partnership, and they'll do it quietly. Nobody wants to go to war with Orion. My jaw locked. You're lying, I said. She shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But ask yourself, why would SpaceX call you into their most private lab on no notice? She paused. Because they found something. That landed somewhere deep. Move, I said. She didn't. You can still save yourself, Isabella, she murmured. Turn on Hayes Financial. Turn on your father. Turn on Liam. Claim they coerced you. My stomach twisted with disgust. I won't betray them. You already did. This time I shoved her hand away with more force than I intended. She stumbled back, eyes flashing. You'll regret this, she spat. Then I'll regret it, I said, sliding into the car. As the door closed, I saw her in the side mirror, standing in the snow, arms wrapped around herself, though her smile remained razor-sharp. I didn't look back. Marcus waited until she disappeared down the sidewalk, before asking quietly, Home, Miss Hayes, no, I said. Astermind. He nodded and pulled into traffic. By the time we reached the gleaming skyscraper that housed my company, the snow had turned into a delicate storm of white swirling under the streetlights like stardust. Inside the building buzzed with concentrated energy, a different world entirely from the chaos of Hayes Tower. Clara met me at the private elevator, her expression tight. I got your message. What happened? You don't want the long version, I said as we stepped inside. How bad is the press? She tapped her tablet. Bad. Orion paid influencers to spread their narrative. They're using words like data theft and algorithm hijacking. They're also pushing the idea that Athena Core was built off stolen Hayes tech. That report model was never stolen, I muttered. I wrote it. I know, she said. But the public doesn't. The elevator doors opened into our floor. The soft glow of LED panels, the hum of servers behind glass walls, the whiteboards filled with equations and concept maps. This was my world, my sanctuary, my creation. We walked into the war room where Alex was already pacing. Tell me everything, I said. Alex didn't sugarcoat. He never did. SpaceX wants a full audit. They're not pulling out, but they're nervous. Orion's noise is getting loud enough to rattle even Musk's people. I swallowed the burn of anger. So we go in and prove them wrong. It's not that simple, he said. They'll test Athena down to the last line of code. If there's even a resemblance to anything Hayes-related, there won't be. I cut in. He hesitated, then pushed a file across the table. This showed up anonymously an hour ago. I opened it. A snippet of code. At first glance harmless. But my throat tightened. It was an old version of my risk algorithm. The first draft. The one I wrote years ago while still working at Hayes Financial. It wasn't identical to Athena Core, but it was similar enough to raise questions. How did Orion get this? I whispered. Alex shook his head. I don't know. Clara stepped closer. Is this version in any of our systems? No, I said. I wrote this on my personal computer before Hayes ever saw it. Before the board destroyed it. Before I froze. Before Liam stole my prototype to impress Sabrina 2 years ago. My pulse thudded. He had shared it. He must have. And Sabrina, being Sabrina, had kept a copy. Alex frowned. When I looked up at them both. Orion didn't steal anything from me, I said, voice trembling. Sabrina gave it to them. Clara sucked in a breath. Alex swore under his breath. Of course she did. It's how they knew your weak spots before they even attacked. Everything clicked into place. Orion's timing, their confidence, their pre-planned smear campaign, and Sabrina being right there in the boardroom delivering their message for them. She's been working with them the whole time, I whispered. Alex nodded grimly. She's their informant. My hands curled into fists. We're going to expose her. We can, he said, but first, you need to pass that SpaceX audit. That's the only thing standing between you and a full-blown collapse. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. Then we prepare. All night if we have to. Clara nodded. The team is already gathering. For the next 6 hours, we built a war strategy. We reviewed every segment of Athena Core, every timestamp, every version history, every log. We prepared documents, charts, counter-arguments, validations. By midnight, the room was filled with empty coffee cups and glowing screens. By 2 a.m., exhaustion hit like gravity, but I refused to stop. Alex watched me with concern. You need sleep before tomorrow. No, I said. I need to win. He stepped closer. Isabella, you can't walk into SpaceX like this. I can walk in however I choose, I snapped. He held my gaze. Then choose to walk in strong. Something inside me softened. He was right. I sank into the nearest chair, rubbing my eyes. 5 hours. That's enough. Clara closed her laptop. We'll take shifts reviewing the code again. As they left to coordinate the night team, I stayed in the quiet room, staring at the glowing city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The snow kept falling soft and relentless. My family was cracking. My enemies were circling. SpaceX held my future in its hands, and Sabrina was out there smiling in the dark, thinking she'd finally found a way to bury me. I stood slowly, gathering my coat, my laptop, my notes. Let them circle. Let them scheme. Let them think Athena was fragile, that I was fragile. Because tomorrow, when I walked into SpaceX's high-security lab, I wouldn't walk in alone. I would walk in armored with truth, with proof, with the fire they had spent years trying to extinguish. And this time, I wasn't fighting to survive. I was fighting to win. The security gates at SpaceX's private research wing slid open with a soft metallic hiss, and the moment I stepped inside, the air shifted cooler, sharper electric with the hum of engineering genius. It wasn't like entering another company. It was like walking into the future. My footsteps echoed on polished concrete, the sound swallowed by the vastness of the place. Screens glowed in every direction, engineers moved with purposeful speed, and robotic arms calibrated precision tools behind glass walls. Alex walked beside me, carrying 2 cases filled with our documentation. Clara trailed just behind us, headset ready, eyes alert. No one spoke, we didn't need to. The stakes hung between us like a third presence. A woman in a fitted black blazer approached us, her expression crisp but not unfriendly. "Miss Hayes." "Yes," I said, steadying my voice. She extended a hand. "I'm Dr. Naomi Chen, head of Systems Integrity. I'll be overseeing your review today." Her handshake was firm but not intimidating. A scientist's handshake. A leader's handshake. "Come with me," she said. "We'll begin in the Delta lab." We followed her through a maze of glass corridors until we reached a sealed door with a biometric panel. Dr. Chen pressed her palm against it. It scanned, beeped, then the door slid open, revealing the kind of room people only see in documentaries. A circular lab, white floors, a suspended ring of monitors showing real-time system scans. 2 SpaceX engineers sat waiting, their eyes narrowing, curious but calculating. Athena core was projected on a central screen, rotating slowly like a digital sculpture. Dr. Chen clasped her hands behind her back. "Let's start with what's already been flagged." She went straight to the point. "Good. No pity, no pretense, only truth." She clicked a remote and a split-screen comparison appeared. On the left, an early draft of the Hayes financial risk model. On the right, a structural piece of Athena Core's predictive logic. My stomach tightened. The resemblance was there, but only in the skeleton. The DNA was completely different. Dr. Chen looked at me. "These similarities are what concern us." Before Alex or Clara could speak, I stepped forward. "I wrote both." Dr. Chen's eyebrows lifted. "Explain." I nodded at the screen. The Hayes model was my first attempt at dynamic risk prediction. I drafted it at home. On my own time. I brought it to Hayes and they rejected it. "Destroyed it," Alex added. I swallowed. But I kept the original files. Not because I wanted to use Hayes data later, but because I believed in the concept even if they didn't. Dr. Chen studied me. "So Athena isn't built on Hayes tech?" "No," I said. "It's built on the person Hayes underestimated." For a moment, no one moved. Then Dr. Chen turned to her engineers. "Bring up the chronological Git logs." One engineer typed rapidly, and a timeline appeared, time-stamped coding entries, version histories, builds from 5 years ago, all of them under my name, all of them predating the Hayes scandal. "Run integrity checks," Dr. Chen said. Lines of code scrolled across the screens like lightning. "Clean," one engineer murmured. "Clean," echoed the other. Relief washed through me, but only slightly. Dr. Chen wasn't finished. "We still need to review the contextual architecture." Orion submitted a claim stating that your data matches theirs. Alex scoffed under his breath. Orion submitted a forged claim. "Forged or not," Dr. Chen said, "SpaceX has to verify." We spent the next hour dissecting Athena's architecture. I walked them through every layer: the predictive engine, the reinforcement learning loop, the anomaly detection lattice. I explained the conceptual evolution, the failures, the rebuilds. Dr. Chen listened intently, asking precise questions that only someone deeply embedded in this field could ask. This wasn't a witch hunt. It was a test. And I was passing. Midway through the session, one of the engineers frowned at his monitor. Dr. Chen, I'm getting a trace. My body went rigid. A trace from where she asked? He expanded the view, a faint, almost invisible line of code embedded deep in the architecture. Clara gasped. That wasn't there last week. Alex's voice dropped to a whisper. Sabrina. Dr. Chen zoomed in, her face tightening. This isn't part of Athena, she said slowly. This is a packet signature. My breath caught. A tracking signature? She nodded. Yes. Someone attempted to embed a metadata flag inside your system. My pulse thundered. Orion. No, Dr. Chen said softly. This isn't Orion's signature. It's cleaner, more subtle. Her eyes met mine. Someone close to you inserted this. Someone who had access before your company's firewall upgrade. Everything inside me went cold. Sabrina. Remove it, I said. The engineer hesitated. Miss Hayes, this isn't malware, it's deeper. Someone embedded this as part of a reconciliation patch. It's not easily removed without destabilizing the AI. You're telling me she corrupted Athena, I whispered. No, Dr. Chen said. She tried to corrupt you. We spent another 2 hours tracing the fragment, proving its origin, isolating its purpose, demonstrating its irrelevance to Athena's actual function. The engineers confirmed that the signature never activated. It had no access privileges. It didn't alter the system. It was designed solely to cause suspicion, to cause doubt, to destroy me from the inside out. When the final integrity report printed, Dr. Chen tapped the page twice and handed it to me. Athena core passes, she said, completely. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Clara covered her face with both hands, exhaling shakily. Alex let out a hoarse laugh of relief. I steadied myself. Thank you. Dr. Chen nodded. One more thing, I looked up. SpaceX wants to offer you an expansion proposal. Full integration. Global partnership. We'll formalize the details next week. My heart stopped. You mean yes, she said. We're moving forward. I felt the shift inside me, like something old finally cracked and something new took root. Dr. Chen softened for the first time all day. You didn't just defend your work, Miss Hayes. You proved you're the real architect behind it. Someone embedded this as part of a reconciliation patch. It's not easily removed without destabilizing the AI. You're telling me she corrupted Athena, I whispered. No, Dr. Chen said. She tried to corrupt you. We spent another 2 hours tracing the fragment, proving its origin, isolating its purpose, demonstrating its irrelevance to Athena's actual function. The engineers confirmed that the signature never activated. It had no access privileges. It didn't alter the system. The wind picked up, swirling white around us. SpaceX had tested my code. Orion had tested my integrity. Sabrina had tested my patience. And I had passed every one of them. Tomorrow I would begin testing them back, and I wouldn't be gentle. The moment I stepped back into Astermind's headquarters, the entire floor burst into motion. Word of the SpaceX audit had already spread. Engineers lifted their heads, analysts stood straighter, and whispers rippled through the office like electricity. But I didn't slow down, not yet. Clara rushed to my side, breathless. The team is waiting in the conference room. They want to hear everything. They will, I said. But first, bring me all correspondence we've ever had with Orion Systems. Every email, every meeting request, every shared document from the early days. Alex raised an eyebrow. You're going after them. I looked at him. I'm done playing defense. We entered the 10th floor war room, the glass walls reflecting a skyline buried under gray clouds. The team stood when I walked in, a gesture they'd never done before. For the first time, I felt the unspoken shift in the air. Respect. Not just authority, I set the SpaceX integrity report on the table. Athena Core passed, I said simply. The room erupted, loud cheers, relieved laughter, the kind of adrenaline that made months of fear crack open into hope. But I lifted a hand and the room fell silent again. There's more, I said. Someone inside my past tried to sabotage us. They embedded a trace code meant to raise suspicion during the audit. It didn't activate, but SpaceX found it. One engineer cursed softly. Another muttered, unbelievable. We're going to isolate how it got in, I said. And then we're going to expose the people behind it. I looked at the faces around me, young, driven, brilliant. My people, my team. Tonight we fight back. The room shifted from shock to determination. Screens flickered to life. Code logs filled the monitors. The lights dimmed, and Astramind became a battlefield. 3 hours in, Clara approached with a printed report. Here, all communication from the first year. Before the launch. Before the upgrades. The list was short. Too short. We had barely interacted with Orion, just initial vendor screenings they'd lost. Something's missing, I murmured. Something or someone, Alex asked. My pulse caught. Someone gave them access. We sent the logs to our cyber forensics contractor. Within minutes, a notification pinged. Unauthorized login attempt. Archive server. Timestamp 2 years ago. My breath froze. That was the year Liam first introduced Sabrina to the family, the year she started appearing at events, board meetings, dinners. The year she called me cute for still believing in my little startup. I clicked open the activity log. There it was. Users, Davenport, IP address Hayes, financial internal network, action file, access request, target prototype, risk model, V1 status granted. Clara leaned over my shoulder. That's her. That's Sabrina's old work ID. Alex swore. She accessed your files before you even left, Hayes. I stared at the screen, anger curling through me like smoke. She didn't just steal my model, I whispered. She sold it, and then used Orion to bury you, Alex said. The room fell into a tense silence. Clara broke it first. What now? I closed the file? Now we take this to the top? I grabbed my coat and strode toward the elevator. Alex hurried after me. Where are you going? To Hayes Tower, I said. We're confronting her. He stepped in front of me. Isabella, think. I am. You just survived a public attack. You passed the SpaceX audit. You gained ground. Don't throw that away by storming into your old company with accusations. I looked him dead in the eye. This isn't about anger. It's about evidence. The elevator dinged open. I stepped inside. Alex cursed, then followed. By the time we reached the parking garage, my heart was hammering, furious, controlled, focused. Snow spiraled through the air. As we pulled onto the freeway, the city lights smudged by the thickening flurries. Hayes Tower loomed ahead, cold glass, rising into the storm. Security recognized me immediately. They always had. Even when I'd left in disgrace, the system still remembered my name. The boardroom lights glowed behind frosted windows. A meeting was already underway. Perfect. I walked in without knocking. The room fell into dead silence. My parents, Liam, the board. And at the far end, seated with her legs crossed and her smile sharpened to a knife, Sabrina. She smirked when she saw me, ready to pounce. Well, well, she purred. The prodigal daughter returns. Should we clap? I tossed the printed log onto the table. Her smirk vanished. My father's eyes darted to the document. What's this? A copy of your server access log, I said, showing who downloaded my original risk model before I left the company. Sabrina's face drained of color. The board leaned forward. That's your employee ID, the woman with the sharp eyes said to Sabrina. This is dated 2 years ago. Sabrina forced a laugh. That's ridiculous. Anyone could fake. It was pulled from Hayes' servers. I cut in. Directly, with a subpoena-ready timestamp. Would you like to explain? Her jaw worked. Her fingers twitched. Liam shifted uneasily. Sabrina, tell them you didn't. Shut up, Liam, she barked, panic cracking her voice. The room stiffened. My father rose, slowly, face ashen. Sabrina, Did you access my daughter's project? She didn't answer. Her silence said everything. I stepped closer, keeping my voice level. You didn't just steal it. You gave it to Orion. And when Athena outgrew your stolen version, you tried to sabotage me with a code fragment. Sabrina's eyes darted wildly. You can't prove that I already have. The woman with sharp eyes held up the printed report. This is enough to terminate your contract and start legal proceedings. And enough to ruin your career. Permanently added another board member. Sabrina snapped. She stood shaking fury, twisting her features. I did what I had to. She thinks she's better than us, better than Hayes, better than Liam, better than everyone. She deserved to be knocked down. I tilted my head. And now she inhaled sharply, chest heaving. Now you want to destroy me. No, I said softly. You destroyed yourself. My mother stood up suddenly, voice trembling. Get out! Everyone froze. She pointed at Sabrina, eyes fierce. Out! You are finished here. Sabrina stared around the room at Liam, who wouldn't meet her eyes, at my father, rigid with betrayal, at the board, stunned, at me, calm and unshakable. Then she fled, heels clicking like cracked glass. When the door slammed behind her, the room exhaled all at once. My father sat down heavily. Isabella, thank you, but I held up a hand. I didn't do this for you. My gaze shifted to the entire board. I did it because she attacked my work, my team, my integrity. The silver-haired man nodded slowly. And now I turned toward the window, watching the snow swirl outside. And now I said I go rebuild what she tried to break. I walked out without waiting for their gratitude. In the hallway, Alex caught up to me. You were terrifying in there. I wasn't trying to be. You didn't have to try, he said. You just were. We stepped outside into the icy air. So what happens next, he asked. I looked up at the falling snow. Next we go back to Astramind. And then I said, feeling a new fire settle in my chest, we prepare for war, because Sabrina was gone, but Orion was still coming, and I was ready. By the time I returned to Astramind, the snowstorm had thickened into a white curtain, sealing the city under a veil of ice. The moment I stepped into the lobby, my team rose from their desks, as if pulled by the same magnetic force. Their expressions shifted: fear, hope, determination, all mixed with the kind of respect I never imagined earning in my previous life. Clara hurried toward me, clutching her tablet. Isabella, you need to see this. I didn't slow my pace as we walked toward the war room. Tell me. It's Orion, she said. They just filed an emergency petition with the SEC. My stomach tightened. On what grounds? She showed me the headline glowing on her screen. Orion Systems accuses Astramind of intellectual property breach. Federal review requested. The moment the words hit me, the room spun slightly, but I didn't stop walking. Instead, I pushed through the conference room door where Alex stood with our legal team pages scattered across the table like battlefield wreckage. What did they file? I asked. Alex lifted his eyes to mine, steady, fierce, ready to go to war. A full-blown injunction request. They're trying to freeze Athena Core. Clara inhaled sharply. Can they do that? Yes, Alex said. But only temporarily. And only if they convince the SEC you might have used proprietary tech. I paced, adrenaline tightening every muscle in my body. They won't win. Not after the SpaceX audit. They don't have to win, he said. They just have to stall you. It clicked instantly. The expansion deal. SpaceX needed Athena Core operational and fully cleared before integration. If Orion slowed us down even by 1 week, we'd lose momentum. The press would turn, investors would panic, competitors would pounce. This is strategic, I said. They're not trying to prove anything. They're trying to cripple us long enough to kill the partnership. Alex nodded grimly. Exactly. A low hum filled my ears, the kind that came right before impact rage, sharpened and cold. How long before the court reviews it? 48 hours, he said. And they want a preliminary interview with you. For what I demanded. For alleged intellectual theft. Clara slammed her tablet down. But that's insane. We have timestamps, logs, SpaceX verified everything, and Orion knows that, Alex replied. But the public doesn't, and the courts haven't seen it. I lifted my chin. Then we'll show them. Before anyone could respond, the overhead speakers crackled. The receptionist's voice echoed through the floor. Miss Hayes, you may want to come up front. Now. Alex and Clara exchanged a look. I walked quickly down the glass hallway, my heels striking the floor in sharp, decisive beats. When I reached the lobby, I stopped short. A cluster of photographers stood outside the revolving doors, camera flashes exploding like lightning. Reporters pressed against the glass, shouting questions as security tried to hold them back. But that wasn't what froze me. Standing at the center of the chaos, perfectly coiffed, draped in a camel coat and smiling like a queen welcoming peasants, Sabrina. She spotted me instantly. Her smile widened. Well, well, she said as she swept inside. You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you? Security moved toward her, but she held up a hand. Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to talk. I stepped forward. You don't get to walk in here. I can walk anywhere, she purred. Especially now that Orion has asked me to lead their compliance division. My throat tightened. You're working for Orion, please, she scoffed, flicking a piece of lint from her sleeve. I've been working with Orion for months. This is just the first time I get to do it publicly. I stared at her. You sold stolen data. You sabotaged our code. You committed multiple federal crimes. She smiled sweetly. Prove it. But that wasn't what froze me. Standing at the center of the chaos, perfectly coiffed, draped in a camel coat and smiling like a queen welcoming peasants, Sabrina. She spotted me instantly. Her smile widened. Well, well, she said as she swept inside. You didn't think you could get rid of me that easily, did you? Security moved toward her, but she held up a hand. Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm just here to talk. I stepped forward. You don't get to walk in here. Orion is willing to withdraw the SEC petition, she said. And clear your name publicly. Clara laughed incredulously. Why would we ever? Sabrina cut her off with a raised eyebrow. In exchange for one thing, she extended the envelope toward me. Dissolve Astramind. The words felt like a slap. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Sabrina stepped closer, lowering her voice. You walk away from the company. From Athena Core. From the SpaceX deal. Clara stepped forward, fury radiating off her. We have logs, access records, timestamps, your ID. That's cute, Sabrina interrupted. You think any of that matters once Orion's legal team buries you in filings? I forced myself to breathe evenly. Why are you here? Her smile sharpened. To make you an offer. I blinked. An offer? Oh yes, she said. A generous one. She pulled a slim envelope from her coat and held it up. You would let them destroy an entire company, my company, because of a grudge. Grudge, Sabrina laughed. Oh, sweetheart, you think this is personal. Orion wants global dominance. You're in the way. Remove yourself and everyone gets what they want. My pulse pounded in my ears. Everyone. Except me. I stepped forward slowly until our faces were just inches apart. You're making one mistake, I said quietly. Her smile twitched. And what's that? You think I'm alone? And Orion will make everything disappear. No investigation, no hearings, no headlines, no prison for whoever authorized that stolen code 2 years ago. Her smile stretched wider. Especially your brother. Pain punched through me like a fist made of ice. My voice was barely a whisper. This is about Liam, of course, she said with a laugh. He's Orion's bargaining chip now. And your weakness. Clara lunged forward. That's blackmail. It's business, Sabrina said. I stared at her. You have 48 hours. After that, the SEC will freeze Athena Core. And with a final icy smile, she turned and strode back into the storm of cameras as reporters swarmed her. I felt Clara grip my arm. Isabella. But my gaze stayed locked on the revolving doors. on the snow swirling around Sabrina, on the war that had finally revealed its true shape. Alex stepped beside me. What now? I inhaled slowly, deeply, letting the fire settle into my bones. Now, I said, we fight back. Clara nodded. With what? I turned toward them both. With everything we have, and everything we are, because Orion wanted my company. Sabrina wanted my downfall. The SEC wanted my compliance. The world wanted a spectacle. But I wanted something bigger. The truth. Justice. And a future no one could take from me. 48 hours. That was all we had. All I needed. The storm hadn't let up overnight. By morning, Seattle was coated in a sheet of white, so thick it silenced the usual traffic hum outside my apartment. I stood at the window with a cup of black coffee, watching the flakes swirl past like tiny warnings scattered from the sky. 48 hours. That was all I had before the SEC made its decision, before Orion froze Athena Core and crippled everything I had built. My phone buzzed on the counter. Alex's car downstairs. Team already gathering. They pulled an all-nighter. Clara's spaces opening for the hearing. We need to prep statements. Another message popped up, this one from an unknown number. We need to talk. Now, Liam, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Of course he'd reach out eventually. The SEC petition threatened more than my company, it threatened our entire family. I typed back, meet me at Astramind. No excuses. 5 minutes later, I was in the elevator heading down, determination tightening its grip on every muscle. The lobby doors slid open to a flurry of snow and the waiting SUV. Alex sat inside with documents spread across his lap, pen tucked behind one ear, his tie slightly askew. You look like the storm outside, he said as I got in. Good, I muttered. Storms get things done. He handed me a stack of papers. This is the draft for your SEC statement. It's solid, but we need to decide how far you're willing to go. Meaning, if we expose Sabrina, we expose your brother by default. I stared at the pages, my chest tightening. I'm not sacrificing Liam. Alex held my eyes. Even if he's the liability that gets Athena shut down, I didn't answer. He didn't push. When we reached Astramind, the tension in the building was palpable. Screens glowed with scrolling code, the legal team huddled in corners with coffee-stained notes, analysts pulled up risk projections on the walls. Everyone was moving, thinking, fighting. And all of it depended on what we did next. Clara met us near the server room. We traced the metadata flag inserted into Athena. It came from a modified OS patch. Someone knew exactly how to plant it without triggering any alerts. Someone trained, Alex said. Someone with access to Hayes systems, Clara added. I rubbed my temples, which means Sabrina didn't act alone. Exactly, she said. Orion had help inside Hayes Financial. The implication landed like a blade. My father's board. My brother. A dozen possibilities, none of them clean. Before I could respond, the elevator dinged and Liam stumbled out. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling. It wasn't anger that hit me. It was the familiar ache of childhood memories of the brother who once pulled me out of the lake when I slipped on the dock, of the boy who used to leave notes in my backpack telling me I could do anything. He approached carefully as if I were an animal that might bolt. Isabella, he said softly. I didn't know she'd go this far. I folded my arms. You helped her. No, he said quickly. I helped her access internal files because she told me it would help the company. I didn't know she'd use them against you. And the gambling debt? I asked. The forged signature, the Orion loan, his face twisted with shame. I made mistakes, terrible ones. I know that. But I swear I didn't know she was involved with Orion until it was too late. And now that it's public, I asked. Now that they're threatening to destroy my company unless I take the fall, he looked down. I came here because I want to fix it. I laughed softly, bitterly. And how do you propose to fix it? Offer to go to the SEC yourself. Throw yourself into the fire for once his eyes lifted. Yes. The room went silent around us. Clara's tablet lowered. Alex stopped flipping through documents. One of our engineers even turned from his screen. I stared at my brother as if seeing him for the first time in years. You would do that, he nodded. I can't undo what I did, but I can stop it from taking you down. My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him. God, I did. But trust wasn't something that could be resurrected with a promise. Let me talk to the SEC, he said. Let me tell them I accessed your prototype. That I let Sabrina see it. That I was manipulated. And what happens to you, I whispered. I don't matter. And now that it's public, I asked. Now that they're threatening to destroy my company unless I take the fall, he looked down. I came here because I want to fix it. I laughed softly, bitterly. And how do you propose to fix it? Offer to go to the SEC yourself. Throw yourself into the fire for once his eyes lifted. Yes. The room went silent around us. Clara's tablet lowered. Alex stopped flipping through documents. One of our engineers even turned from his screen. But this also gives Orion a new angle. They'll say you benefited from stolen tech. No, Clara countered. If Liam admits he stole the file before Athena existed, then the narrative shifts completely. I took a breath, steadying the quake inside me. We do this, I said. But we do it my way. We moved into the conference room, spreading out documents across the table. Liam sat beside me, nervous but resolute. Alex coordinated with our legal team. Clara built a timeline graphic on the monitor. For 2 hours we crafted the strategy. Every email, every Git log, every timestamp. Every shred of proof showing Athena was mine, built from the ground up, not stolen from Hayes. Then came the final step. The statement. Our attorney handed me the draft. You'll deliver this at the hearing tomorrow. I read it once. Twice. Then I set it down. This isn't strong enough, I said. Alex raised an eyebrow. What do you want to add? The truth, I replied. All of it. And I began writing. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Clara read the final version first. Her eyes widened. This isn't just a defense. It's an attack. Alex took it next. A slow grin spread across his face. Orion has no idea what's coming. Even our attorney looked impressed. Are you sure? She asked. There's no going back from a statement like this. I lifted my chin. I'm sure. Liam swallowed hard. Isabella, if this brings me down, it won't, I said gently. You'll take responsibility for what you did, not for what she did. He nodded, tears forming despite his efforts. When the meeting finally ended and the team returned to prepping for the hearing, I stepped out onto the rooftop terrace to breathe in the icy air. The city glowed beneath the snowfall, distant and fragile and beautiful. Alex joined me quietly. You okay? He asked. No, I admitted. But I'm ready. He nodded slowly. Tomorrow is going to be a war. I didn't look at him. My gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, the place where darkness met light, where storms broke open to reveal dawn. I've fought enough battles alone, I said. This time, I'm not afraid. You shouldn't be, he said softly, because tomorrow you're walking in with the truth, and the truth, I whispered, is louder than anything Orion can throw at me. He exhaled breath, fogging the cold air. Then let's make tomorrow the day they stop underestimating you. I nodded. Tomorrow wasn't the fight of my life, it was the fight for my future, and I intended to win it. The federal building rose like a slab of steel against the winter sky, its windows fogged by the breath of people waiting outside for answers. News vans lined the curb. Reporters huddled under umbrellas as snow drifted down in slow, icy spirals. The world felt suspended, quiet but tense, as if the city itself was holding its breath for what would happen next. I stepped out of the SUV and tightened my coat. Alex walked on my right, Clara on my left, and behind us came our legal team with folders pressed tightly to their chests. Liam trailed a few steps back, pale but determined. Camera flashes went off instantly. Miss Hayes, is it true Orion filed for an emergency injunction? Are you testifying today? Did your former company steal the early Athena model? Is Astramind collapsing? Are you here to negotiate a settlement? I didn't answer. My silence made the reporters press forward harder, shouting louder. Security formed a barrier, pushing them back. The cold air bit into my cheeks, but my heartbeat stayed steady. Steadier than it had any right to be. Inside, the lobby was warm and overly bright, its marble floors reflecting the overhead lights. People murmured quietly in line. Government officials strode past with stacks of documents. The elevators chimed in a steady rhythm, ding, 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 like a countdown. Our attorney, Miss Vega, turned to me. Remember, you set the tone. Whatever they ask, stay factual. Answer directly. You did nothing wrong. I know, I said. But facts didn't always win. Not in a world where power twisted stories faster than truth could catch them. We reached the hearing room on the 9th floor. The hallway smelled faintly of paper-cold air and nerves. A guard checked our names, then opened the double doors. Inside, the space was smaller than I expected. No grand courtroom, just a long table. A panel of commissioners and rows of chairs filled with attorneys, corporate representatives, and observers. And at the far end, sitting with a perfectly pressed suit, glossy hair, and a smug glint in her eyes, Sabrina. She crossed one leg over the other, giving me a slow, venomous smile. Beside her sat 2 Orion executives in black suits. On the other side of the room, my father sat stiffly next to his lawyer. He didn't turn when I entered. My mother sat beside him, hands clasped together, tightly, knuckles white. For once she didn't look polished. She looked terrified. Liam took a seat behind me, his hands shaking. Commissioner Hartwell, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair, rapped her gavel lightly. This emergency review will come to order. Everyone stood, then sat. She adjusted her glasses. We are convened to assess whether Astramind Technologies engaged in intellectual property theft and whether an injunction should be issued preventing the deployment of Athena Core. A hush fell over the room. Orion Systems has submitted evidence alleging Miss Isabella Hayes used proprietary financial models from Hayes Financial to develop her current AI system. Hartwell turned to me. Miss Hayes, you will have the opportunity to respond. Sabrina leaned back, smirking. Hartwell nodded toward the Orion side. Orion, you may present. One of their executives stood, clearing his throat dramatically. Commissioner's Athena Core bears structural resemblance to a model originally submitted within Hayes Financial. We believe Miss Hayes illegally acquired protected data and repurposed it into her current AI, then concealed the origins of the model. He clicked a remote. A large monitor lit up with side-by-side code fragments, carefully edited, misleadingly framed. Clara stiffened. Alex muttered a curse under his breath. We further submit, he continued, that Hayes Financial confirms an unauthorized export of this file during Miss Hayes's employment. My eyes snapped to my father. He didn't lift his head. Sabrina whispered something to her attorney, smiling all the while. The Orion executive finished with a dramatic flourish. We believe an immediate injunction is necessary to prevent further misuse of corporate property. Commissioner Hartwell nodded. Thank you. Miss Hayes, your response. I stood. The room went silent. I walked to the podium, set my papers down, and lifted my chin. My name is Isabella Hayes, and everything you were just told is a lie. A ripple ran through the audience. I clicked the projector remote. A new timeline appeared. Commissioners, this is the Git log of Athena Core. Every timestamp predates the alleged misuse. Every entry is traceable to my personal computers and authenticated by third-party forensic analysts. Another click. The earliest version of Athena, then called Project Helios, appeared with a timestamp from 5 years earlier. This is the original prototype I wrote before Hayes Financial ever reviewed a single page of my work. They rejected it. They destroyed it. But I kept my original files because I believed in the concept. A commissioner leaned forward. And the Hayes model, I nodded. My draft was taken. A murmur. The Orion team stiffened. Without my consent, I continued. Accessed from Hayes' financial system not by me, but by someone using a different employee ID. I clicked again. The stolen access log flashed on screen. Users Davenport location Hayes financial internal server file prototype risk model V1 date. 2 years before Athena launch, I let the silence linger. Then I turned toward Sabrina. She went rigid. That ID belongs to Sabrina Davenport, I said clearly. A former employee of Hayes Financial? She accessed my prototype without permission. She copied it. And later, she provided Orion with that copy. Commissioner Hartwell's eyes sharpened. Miss Davenport, is this true? Sabrina's lawyer rose quickly. We object. This evidence has not been authenticated, Alex stood. It has. Verified this morning by Astromind's cyber forensics team. That is not an independent party, the lawyer began. Miss Vega stepped in. Actually, it was verified by SpaceX as part of their integrity audit. A ripple ran through the room like shockwave. The commissioners exchanged looks. Hartwell spoke carefully. SpaceX confirmed this. Yes, I said. Yesterday, they cleared Athena Core in full. Sabrina's face drained of color. The Orion executives shifted uncomfortably. I continued, my voice steady. And this, I clicked. To the next slide is the metadata signatures someone tried to bury inside Athena to suggest tampering. The screen displayed the signature. The SEC should know this code fragment is not mine. It is malicious. It was inserted months ago, and it matches the digital fingerprint of a device registered to Orion Systems. Another shockwave of murmurs. And finally, I said, turning away from the screen, there is one more piece of truth. I looked back at Liam. He swallowed hard. He stood slowly and walked to the front of the room beside me. His hands shook, but he lifted his chin. My name is Liam Hayes, he said hoarsely. I'm the one who helped Sabrina access the Hayes server. I thought she was helping the company. I didn't know she was working with Orion. A gasp rippled through the room. I forged signatures, he continued. I signed a risky loan contract. I lied to cover it up. My sister had nothing to do with any of it. She didn't steal anything. I'm the one who nearly destroyed my family. My parents looked stunned. Sabrina looked furious. Liam stepped back, broken but brave. Commissioner Hartwell lifted a hand. The room fell silent. We have heard enough for now. We will recess for deliberation. Everyone stood. The room buzzed with chaotic whispers, frantic shuffling reporters trying to catch sound bites. But I didn't move. I stood still. Quiet, centered. Alex touched my arm. You did it. Clara exhaled shakily. They don't stand a chance. Even Miss Vega's voice softened. Your testimony was flawless, Isabella, but I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I turned toward my father. He looked at me with something unfamiliar, something raw, pride, not polished, not forced, not conditional, real. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. He opened his mouth, but I shook my head. Wait, I whispered. Let's finish this first. He nodded. I stepped out of the hearing room and into the cold hallway, letting the air cool the heat in my blood. One more vote, one more verdict, one more battle. When I stepped toward the window overlooking the snow-covered city, I felt Alex come to stand beside me. You good? He asked quietly. I nodded. Because whatever happens next, he said, you already changed everything. I watched the snow drift past the glass. I know, I said softly, but I want the truth written in ink, not just in hearts. Tomorrow the verdict would come, and so would the real war. But for the first time in years, I felt the outcome shift toward truth, toward justice, toward the future I'd built with my own hands. For the first time, I felt unstoppable. The verdict came the next morning. I barely slept, a shallow drift of exhaustion, adrenaline, and memory. But when dawn finally cut through the blinds, I felt strangely calm. Not peaceful, Not yet, but steady, as if something inside me had already accepted the truth before the world spoke it aloud. Clara picked me up at 7 sharp. Alex sat in the back of the SUV with his laptop open, scrolling through last-minute updates. Liam wasn't with us by my request. He had already done his part, and I didn't want him dragged through another battlefield. The city was still buried under snow, every rooftop and street lamp coated in white. The cold morning air made the world look raw and honest. No more shadows. No more hiding. When we reached the federal building, the crowd was twice the size as yesterday. Reporters pressed forward, cameras flashing, microphones held out like weapons. Security fought to keep the swarm back. Miss Hayes, has Orion responded to your testimony? Is it true SpaceX plans to expand the partnership? Will you press charges against Hayes Financial? Was your brother coerced by Orion? I didn't answer. I walked straight through the noise, through the cold, through the blur of lights, feeling strangely detached, like I was walking toward the closing scene of a book I'd spent years trapped inside. Inside the hearing room, the commissioners were already seated. Orion's attorneys looked tense. Their executives were whispering rapidly into their phones. Sabrina sat stiffly, jaw clenched, mascara smudged at the edges. Her confidence was gone. Her power fractured. Her ambition exposed. I didn't look her way again. Commissioner Hartwell rapped her gavel once. This emergency injunction review is now reconvened. After assessing all testimony, reviewing evidence, and confirming the integrity report provided by SpaceX, the commission has reached a decision. No one breathed. Hartwell lifted a sheet of paper. The SEC finds no evidence that Astramind or its CEO, Miss Isabella Hayes, engaged in intellectual property theft. A wave of relief swept through the room. Clara pressed her hands to her mouth. Alex swore softly under his breath. Even the air seemed to shift as if exhaling with me. Hartwell continued. Further, the commission finds substantial cause to investigate Orion Systems for the submission of knowingly falsified claims and for the attempted manipulation of a federal inquiry. Every Orion executive went rigid. Sabrina froze like a statue carved from ice. And finally, Hartwell said, her voice steady and firm, the commission rejects Orion's injunction request in full. Athena Corps is authorized to proceed without restriction. Cheers erupted behind me. Some people clapped. Others sighed in relief. A few gasped. But I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, letting every word settle into my bones. I was cleared. Astramind survived, and Orion would answer for everything. Sabrina shot to her feet. You can't do this. You don't understand what's at stake, Miss Davenport. Hartwell said sharply, sit down. Sabrina's lawyer yanked her back into her seat, whispering frantically, but she was already unraveling. I slowly turned to face her. She met my eyes, hers, full of fury, panic, disbelief. Mine full of clarity. You tried to destroy everything I built, I whispered. But you only proved exactly why I built it. Clara pressed her hands to her mouth. Alex swore softly under his breath. Even the air seemed to shift as if exhaling with me. Hartwell continued. Further, the commission finds substantial cause to investigate Orion Systems for the submission of knowingly falsified claims and for the attempted manipulation of a federal inquiry. Every Orion executive went rigid. Sabrina froze like a statue carved from ice. The shudders never stopped. My team built Athena Corps from nothing. We defended it with everything. And now we move forward. Another wave of questions. I continued. What Orion tried to do wasn't just an attack on me. It was an attack on innovation, on integrity, on every entrepreneur who's ever been told they don't belong at the table. The crowd buzzed. And I hope today sends a message not just to them but to anyone watching. Power isn't inherited. Power isn't stolen. Power is built. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. Truth by truth. A cheer rose from somewhere in the back. I stepped away, letting security guide me toward the doors. Outside, the snow was still falling soft and relentless, turning the world white again, as if giving me a clean slate. The SUV door opened, but before I got in, I heard someone call my name. Isabella. I turned. My father stood at the top of the building's steps, breath visible in the cold air. My mother beside him. They walked toward me slowly, cautiously, like approaching something fragile they didn't want to break again. My father stopped in front of me. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. Not loud, not commanding, not performative, real. Of all the things I'd heard in the last 24 hours, that was the one that cracked something open inside me. "Thank you," I whispered. My mother touched my arm lightly. "Come home for dinner this Sunday, all of us. No scandals, no business, just family." I nodded, feeling warmth bloom faintly in my chest. "I'll be there." Alex opened the SUV door again. "You ready?" I looked back at the building where my life had nearly been dismantled, at the crowd that watched me fall, and rise at the snow that kept falling like quiet applause. "I'm ready." Back at Astermind, the team greeted me like I'd just returned from battle. There were cheers, confetti cannons someone definitely wasn't authorized to purchase, and hugs I didn't dodge for once. Clara handed me a tablet. "SpaceX sent this." I opened it. "Congratulations. Full partnership approved. Next phase global deployment." My laugh cracked through the air like sunlight. Alex leaned against the conference table smiling. "Looks like you just made history." "No," I said, turning to face the team, the people who chose to believe in me long before anyone else did. "We made history." That night, after the celebration wound down and the city quieted under its blanket of snow, I stood alone on the rooftop terrace. The cold air stung my cheeks, the icy wind tugged at my hair, but none of it mattered. For the first time in my life, my heart felt weightless, free, whole. My phone buzzed with messages. I barely glanced at press requests. "Investor, congratulations, SpaceX updates." Then a final message appeared from Liam. "I'm proud of you, Izzy. Really proud." I smiled softly. The story wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about truth, legacy, reinvention, and the power to rise after being pushed down again and again. I looked out at the glittering skyline and whispered to myself, "You did it. You finally did it." And with that, I walked back inside, ready to build the next chapter of my life, on my terms, with my voice, and without fear. If you've stayed with me through this journey, tell me in the comments what moment hit you the hardest. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories where truth, courage, and resilience finally win.